Luckily, with city water, you are very unlikely to have to worry about bacteria, which is the thing that's going to be the fastest effect on your health. But all the slow health effects are going to be found in the details. The arsenic in your water, the hexavalent chromium, and then a bunch of the chlorine byproducts, PFAS, pharmaceuticals, fluoride, which is still, again, a question mark. All of that is going to be found in the reports.
I'm Meg Carney, an outdoor and environmental journalist, and this is the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast. Thank you for joining us so that together we can create a better outdoor space as we recreate. Water is something that intersects with every aspect of our life, both at home and in the backcountry. Whether you're filtering water from a stream, swimming in a local lake, or just filling up a glass of water at your house, the quality of that water matters. But knowing if your home water quality specifically is up to important health standards can be confusing to understand, which is why we wanted to tackle the question of how exactly we can know if our water is safe to drink and what to do about it if it isn't. Joining me is Cydian Kauffman, the founder of Pure Water Northwest. He helps homeowners, families, and communities take control of their water quality using science-backed practical solutions. With years of hands-on experience in water treatment and a passion for public education, Cydian has guided clients across the Pacific Northwest through challenges like industrial runoff, high iron levels, bacterial contamination, arsenic, iron bacteria, and even mysterious health issues tied to hidden toxins in their household water. So thank you for joining me on the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast today. I am excited to talk about water quality. I am a little bit of a water nerd, so I love to learn more about it. And we've talked about it like a handful of times, but not in great detail. So hopefully this conversation will be really helpful to people as they have questions about water quality at their homes. So I think to start this conversation, we'll just get a little bit of a background from you and how you got interested in water quality in the first place that led you to working at Pure Water Northwest.
My background, thanks for having me on. My background with water treatment is funny because a lot of people get into it because they have real water issues that they're really solving. And I ended up having that after I got into water treatment. It started because I was in property management, actually. And we had tenants who had really bad water in some cases. And their water was like, it smelled like rotten eggs and it was brown. And more than one tenant, more than one separate situation. And it turns out the owner did not have to fix that because it wasn't within the legal guidelines. I mean, it was within the legal guidelines. So I ended up doing testing. And the test results all came back within the MCL, which is maximum contaminant level limits set by the EPA. And so the owner was like, okay, I don't have to fix it. And then it was my job to try and negotiate. Well, you're going to lose a tenant if you don't do something about this. Regardless of the fact that you have a lease, you will lose a tenant. So, but yeah, and that got me into talking to Chris Pelton, who was the founder of Pure Water Northwest. And he just kind of mesmerized me with the difference between the EPA limits. The EPA sets two different standards for drinking water. So yeah.
That's interesting. I feel like a lot of times when I talk to people about their general like life trajectory, it's like there's a problem that they face in their individual life and they're like, oh, this is actually something I'm really interested in. And water quality impacts everyone in the world, and everyone in the United States. And I think when we're hearing about water contamination in general, it can be hard to know what to take seriously, to be like, oh, that's kind of just overblown, they're fear mongering, etc. And so, can you, at a high level, just break down what risks are genuinely worth our attention and which ones that maybe might be overblown? I don't know if that's like answerable or if we should be concerned about all water quality issues, or if there's ones that we should care about more than others.
Oh, for sure. Okay. So, if you hear about lead, you hear about nitrates, you hear about PFAS and forever chemicals, which is everywhere in the news right now, or you hear about bacterial contaminants, those are definitely high ranking things to pay attention to. Um, if municipalities or your local water system, or you do your own test and you come across those types of things, or arsenic even, but that there's a caveat to that. Those are things to really pay attention to. And then things that can be things that are kind of in the middle right now are things like fluoride in drinking water, which I think is everywhere in the news right now. The old news on fluoride was that it affects your IQ at very high levels. The new news is that it may affect your IQ even at low levels. So, but the jury's still out on whether that's the case. I could talk a lot about whether or not fluoride is actually necessary in drinking water, but currently it is not something to be really, really worried about. It's also very easy to get out of your water if you don't want it. And then stuff that's way down the list, if you hear about trace pharmaceuticals or, one singular outbreak of bacteria in a municipality, or generalized panic about toxic water or structured water, that type of stuff maybe would be lower down the list. But all stuff that if someone is particularly concerned about it, something can usually be done about most of it. So that I would say that would be the rankings for me.
Yeah, and do you think that things like nitrates, lead, and PFAS are those the most common contaminants we might encounter in our drinking water, or are there ones that we're going to see more than others?
Yeah, so lead you're going to see in some systems because of the pipes. And the thing that happened over a decade ago with Flint is an example of that. And I think there's a more recent story about that as well. But that would be plumbing, and that would be a genuine concern. And it is something that hopefully is not happening in your area or at your house, because your own home's plumbing can be a culprit for that. But the only way to know about that is to test. Nitrates are going to be more of a rural or agricultural issue. That comes from fertilizers. And there is a buffer zone for nitrates for sure. I mean, you have nitrates if you eat bacon. So it's too many nitrates, you can get something called blue baby syndrome in children, and it is something to be concerned about and look for, but only at higher levels. PFAS, the new EPA standards for forever chemicals, which is PFAS, that is like in the parts per trillion. That is, they do not want any PFAS basically in the water at all. They want that really, really low. The new standards for that are set super low. And that is a reason why the fact that those standards change like that is a reason why this is something to look at ahead of when the EPA sets the standard, and do your own testing. And make your own determination, and talk to maybe a water expert about it. Because in the water industry, we have known that PFAS has been a problem for a while. The EPA takes whatever time they take to confirm that and make their changes, but you at home don't have to wait for that. Manganese is another example of something that the EPA is still kind of debating as to whether or not it's an issue. But while they debate it, I recently had a client call me and say that their doctor, they were having Parkinson's-like symptoms, and their doctor asked them to have us, or to find out whether there's manganese in the water, because manganese at certain levels can cause Parkinson's-like systems because it can affect the nervous system. But manganese is currently a secondary contaminant. It's not considered a major contaminant. So that's an example of something that will probably change later, and we'll say, yes, now it's a primary contaminant. You do need to make sure it's out of your water. But frankly, I don't know that people should wait for that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that the way that the EPA and like our government in general kind of like categorizes and decides on what is harmful or what is a contaminant is somewhat strange. That's from the outside looking in. Maybe they have their reasons. But you did mention in your story about how you got interested in water quality and all of that, the EPA standards and like legal limits or the minimum contaminant.
Yep, maximum contaminant
There we
level.
go. Okay, maximum contaminants. So how do those standards actually get set? I know that there may be some changes happening in the EPA right now under the Trump administration, but they may have like, we have standards in place already before this administration happened. So I don't know which capacity you want to talk about it in, if you want to talk about it before this administration, or if you are aware of maybe some of the changes that are happening right now.
Yeah, I would say the EPA is still growing and learning. I mean, they've been around, I think, since the mid 90s, since the Safe Drinking Water Act or something. I can't remember the name of it, came out, right? So that's not very long, actually, in government terms. I would consider them like an infant in in government terms. But they're doing their best, in my opinion. I believe that they started obviously with bacteria, Cryptosporidium and E. coli and other major water contaminants, the kind of stuff that will kill entire communities. And that's great. If without the EPA, I can guarantee we would have many, many, many more deaths. That's one side of the story. Then they have to put up as a candidate for, we should also look at this. We should also look at this. And they put up a list, like they as a group, they say, well, should we be looking at this? Should we be looking at this? I think the Aaron Brockovich chemical what is that? Chromium 6 or something. I can't remember. I don't think that currently has a class 1 contamination thing set with the EPA, despite all the effort Aaron Brockovich has gone through to try and make it have a primary drinking water contamination limit. So that's interesting, because that is in a lot of municipal water. That particular contaminant is in a lot of municipal water, but at very low levels. And that's where this gets interesting, because not only do they have to decide what contaminant they regulate, they have to also decide at what level it needs to be acted on. So what they ended up doing is setting 2 standards. And the maximum contaminant level, which is the level that everyone thinks about, is actually just the enforceable level. And on their website, they say that it is the level of contamination in drinking water below which there is no known expected, the highest level of contaminant that is allowed in drinking water, MCLs are set as close to the MCLGs as feasible, using best available treatment technology and taking cost into consideration. They're enforceable standards. The MCLG, however, which stands for Maximum Contaminant Level Goal, it says the level of contamination in drinking water below which there is no known expected health risks. MCLGs allow for a margin of safety and are not enforceable. So what that means is you look at your water and most water has some arsenic in it. The MCLG for arsenic is 0. The MCL is 0.01 milligrams per liter. So almost all municipalities have below 0.01. Almost all municipalities have above 0. So what is your standard, listener at home? I don't, like, it is actually true that a little bit of arsenic won't hurt most people. But I have met a family that had this 200-pound muscular guy who seemed to be having organ failure from arsenic, and his 100-pound soaking wet wife had no arsenic problems in her body that they could tell, but they were drinking the same water. So I don't know. I actually have no idea whether or not that is, of major concern for people. I think the people need to educate themselves, understand the 2 levels, decide for themselves how much arsenic they want to drink.
Well, how much arsenic I want to drink is 0. So I hope that's true for everyone. But I know that where you live, like you were mentioning other locations like Flint, and then that a little anecdote about the arsenic water, can definitely influence the types of contaminants and like levels of contaminants that you are consuming. And so if this is something that you're personally concerned about, whether you are on municipal like city water or you have a private well, where should you start with that? Like, is there a place where you can access that information easily, or is that something that you need to independently test on your own dime?
That's a great question. There's a few ways. If you're on a municipal source, you can go to a website called the Environmental Working Group, and you can go to their tap water database. And basically, municipalities around the country send in their water to this group, which is a nonprofit, and then the group tests it. And there's one caveat when using this group. They do say, put right on their website, that you're 1,400 times the health limit or 100 times the health limit or something like that. That is based on a mathematical formula they're using of what's the difference between 0 and the maximum, the legal limit. And then if we take 0 as the starting point, how many times, because if you multiply 0, you still get 0. So it's kind of confusing how they actually get to that. I would not worry about that so much as look at the actual number and compare it to the EPA primary drinking water standards and decide whether you want to base on your health level or the legal level. And then you can decide for yourself what you want to do about it. Because I'll tell you, in most city water applications, getting rid of almost all that stuff is so easy with an under-counter reverse osmosis. And we also have whole house systems now, at least with our company. We have a whole house system that we can get rid of most of that on both sides, on most of the spectrum of it for your entire house, for not very much money. So that's one way to go. Another way to go is almost all municipalities will test their water and they will put a water report online. How extensive the testing is very variable. I've seen some municipalities do giant batteries of tests and some where they're only testing bacteria, chlorine, lead, nitrates, that's it. And then you can also do your own testing. On our website and at various places online, there are places you can buy full spectrum tests. And this is only going to cost you a few $100s and it will do a giant battery of tests. As far as interpreting the tests, you can call me. If you don't take up too much of my time, I don't mind a call. I'll help you for free. Uh, Honestly, ChatGPT is pretty decent at interpreting these test results now. You cannot 100% trust it. You must verify everything, every answer you get there, but it is pretty decent now. I've done several. It wasn't that good when it started, but now it's it's better than it's better than your average like health department worker, in my opinion, at this point at interpreting those results. Maybe not better than water experts who are trained by like the Water Quality Association or something like myself or people in our industry. But yeah, it's not bad for a free resource. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there are it kind of depends what you're looking for, I guess. I was trying to think. I've looked at like water quality data for the area that I live, and I didn't feel like it was very comprehensive. And the other question I had related to that, like, so the municipalities that are testing the water, they test it at a certain location, not necessarily like at your house. So it has to like be transported through all of these other pipes and things like that. And you said that lead can be leached out through pipes, and I'm sure other things can as well. And so, is the municipality then kind of they're not they're obviously doing the test appropriately, but are they like that accurate because it's not being tested at the point of consumption or like where you would be getting it out of the tap?
That is a fantastic question. And for many of the contaminants, the answer is no, they are not super accurate. Um, in fact, thank you for bringing that up. If you really want to get down to it, you have to test at your house and you have to follow testing standards. So for lead, for example, you have to test the first draw of the day, meaning the water needs to have been sitting in the pipes overnight untested. And then you're going to want to test for multiple spots because you're going to want to identify whether the lead is coming in from the pipes outside your house or whether or not the lead level changes at different spots in your house, helping you identify, yes, this is coming from various spots in my plumbing. So that's just one example. Bacteria, for example, if you do a bacteria test, the chance of you as an untrained person getting a false positive, meaning you accidentally contaminate the sample because bacteria is so amazing at doing its job of colonizing. Um, if you do the sample yourself, the chance is quite high that you will get a false positive for bacteria. So chlorine is another example. In in my area, there's an area in Magnolia where a guy has his chlorine level is so high at his house, and then his neighbor across the street, the chlorine level is low. His chlorine level is so high that he feels like it burns. His children feel like it burned their skin before we put in a system for him. Across the street, much less chlorine. And it is all because the way the pipe actually runs is the treatment plant is the starting point and it goes to his house and a couple of his neighbors, then all the way down the road, around, and then back to the across street house. And so it's had so much dispersion before going to the other house that you know, uh, it was diluted enough.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's so interesting. And I mean, you mentioned reverse osmosis systems, and then whole house systems. And the whole house systems I've heard in like, especially PFAS hotspots are really important because like you're showering in it, you're
Yeah.
brushing your teeth with it, etc. And I have also like in my independent research, like narrowed it down for myself, like what kind of water filter system do I want in my home? And it's a reverse osmosis because it does seem to remove everything the most effectively. And so whether you test or not, and you want to protect against a variety of contaminants, what are some of the types of filters? Because I know there are different types that you think improve or treat the water most effectively. And are there any caveats to them at all?
Yes, I will answer your question, but the caveat is the main point that I'd like to make. Um, the best generalized filter is carbon. The major caveat to that is you cannot trust carbon. Like, it's weird, right? Carbon is so good at filtering just about anything um, because if you were to take the surface area of a gram of carbon and spread it out, it would cover 3 tennis courts, a single gram. Because the micron and submicron tunneling through all the carbon is so much that it just has an incredible amount of surface area, which makes it one of the best filters in the world, maybe the best. However, carbon can collect bacteria like crazy. Carbon is super good at getting rid of chlorine. It's pretty dang good at getting rid of PFAS. Test after test after test. If you put PFAS through carbon, it's gone. But then sometimes it's not. Because carbon is filtering. So if anything is blocking that filter, then it's going to go past it. So carbon needs to be cleaned properly, frequently with good backwashing, done the right way, or it needs to be replaced constantly. It needs to be kept in a very clean environment. So we're gonna use ozone, we're gonna use chlorine, or we're going to make sure that the incoming water is really, really well tested, so that we're not getting bacteria like infesting the carbon. And then if you do that, carbon's going to do a pretty good job at a lot of things, but other things it's going to be completely unreliable about. A lot of metals, like arsenic, iron will blow right through it unless it's oxidized iron. It won't touch it. It'll be like the carbon is not there. So there's a lot of things that carbon's great at. And if I had to choose one thing, that would be the thing. But my big caveat to all of this is don't do that. Instead, test, identify exactly what's in your water, and then customize the treatment to that. So a lot of people do that, though. They go out and they get a carbon filter and they're like, cool, I'm done. I would not do that. I would definitely not do that. I would absolutely test and then treat.
So you don't think that there is like a type of filter that most people would be able to install that would take care of most contaminants, or it's really just dependent on your location?
Well, no, if you do reverse osmosis, it's going to take care of most contaminants. Um, the I get now that you're asking it that way, I will rephrase that. Reverse osmosis is the winner in almost every type of water problem. Reverse osmosis, though, can be very expensive. It requires that the water does not have a lot of scale buildup. It can't, the membranes are doing all the work for reverse osmosis. And the membranes, if they get clogged with anything, bacteria, scale, any silica, any sediment, that type of stuff, destroy the membrane super fast and you'll be wasting money. So you need to do anti-scalant or softening ahead of time, and then you're good. You can, and chlorine will destroy it as well. You have to have carbon ahead of it in order to protect it. Now, whether or not you do whole home reverse osmosis or whether or not you do under counter reverse osmosis, that is another matter. for most people who are asking that question, under counter reverse osmosis is a very, very safe way to be like, I don't even want to worry about it. I just want this and it's solved, and that's great. There is no concern for RO making the water less healthy, removing too many minerals. That is not a genuine concern. The reason that is not is because the amount of minerals that you get from water are less than is in, let's say, a slice of bread. You get almost all that from food. Your minerals, your vitamins, you're getting almost all of it from food. And water needs to do what it is supposed to do, which is clean and transfer oxygen and trade oxygen and such for other things in your blood and things like that. So it needs to be doing its job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the remineralization because whenever I've talked about reverse osmosis filters, that's always like the first question people ask me. It's like, well, don't you need the minerals in there? So I was going to ask that. And then the other question that I get a lot about that is how much does it waste water versus a different type of filter because of the way that the system works?
That's a great question. It does waste a lot of water because it has to. The way that it actually is doing its job is, and this is a massive oversimplification, but imagine like two boxes and the water is basically you're making a channel where all the bad stuff can go to one box, and then even though it could go back to this box, the path of least resistance is sending it that way. And so if you've got all that contamination floating in water, that water still needs to be used to flush it down a drain, leaving the non-contaminated water for you to drink. So that then has an issue with, yes, you must flush that. It must go down a drain. That is the way reverse osmosis technology works. It is a amazing, miraculous, wonderful technology, but it must waste water. They have gotten more efficient. Water waste from reverse osmosis has gotten down, like back in the day, you had some that were like 90% water waste because the contamination was so bad. And those same ones today with those really bad contaminations could be down to 40%. We've had some like spectacular, mind-blowing reverse osmosis that puts the bad water back through a loop that gets the waste down to 10%, but that's crazy expensive. So most people are going to be sitting at 40, 50% waste.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm sure that'll just continue to advance
Yeah.
as more testing and technology develops. And I know that your specialty is kind of in drinking water, which we've been talking a lot about, but a lot of people that listen to the podcast are also very avid outdoors people. And so I do want to talk about water safety in terms of like contaminants in outdoor recreation areas, if you're comfortable with that. And kind of like what some overlaps might be in regards to water quality and how it gets monitored, and then the threats that exist that we should be thinking about.
Okay. Yeah, camping is not my biggest area, but there is some overlap. Do you want me to talk about, because obviously we could start with don't drink river water unless you're really, really high.
Okay, I think that we can skip that as far as
Okay.
like, I think most people listening will know that you need to filter your water in the backcountry. And so I think I'm more so thinking about like if you're swimming or recreating and maybe like the types of filters that you might be using. So I'm kind of thinking like algae blooms, or most backcountry water filters aren't capable of removing things like PFAS because the filter is like too small and it can't handle that type of contaminant.
Yes. So one thing you will note that we have the working for us though is PFAS is not circulating through the hydrologic cycle. so we're not getting PFAS runoff from up high in the mountains where it's localized. That being said, I don't, depending on where you're camping, there could be PFAS. Uh, the the algae blooms, that type of bacterial contamination, bacteria absolutely can affect your skin. You can come out of the water itchy or with some sort of growth that you need a cream for. That is all possible. I don't have a ton to say about that because it's not my area of expertise. As far as drinking water filtration goes, though, I have so much to say about that. I mean, I can tell people how to create solar stills and or how to filter their water kind of in an emergency situation. But if you're talking about a product to buy, they have pretty darn good filtration now for drinking water. I don't know if I should talk about a specific company, but we tested all the various Life straws and the various like camping cups. And there was some pretty clear winners with that. I mean, because we actually went to very bad swampy water, pushed it through the thing, then sent the results to a lab to do full spectrum testing at a lab. And the results we got were pretty cool. Do you
Yeah.
mind
Would
the
you be
one?
able to talk about that? I mean, I think that would be really interesting if you're comfortable with that.
The one that came out on top was the Grail Cup.
That's so
Um,
funny. I was just talking about Grail with someone today.
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what you think about it, but it came out as a clear winner. It had nothing in it. It was it, and the reason why makes sense. I mean, I don't know that I would trust that filter as long as they say. Probably, I mean, I'm not going to say one way or the other about that, but it is reverse osmosis essentially that they're doing. And they're basically having you use your own force to force it through a very strong reverse osmosis filter, which then does a pretty good, darn good job of cleaning the water. The before water had cryptosporidium in it. It had E. coli, it had algae, it had some arsenic levels in it. It it became clean water. So um, it did a good job.
How did LifeStraw do in comparison? Because I know that's
Livestock,
a pretty popular one for
livestock,
backpackers.
it was great. There was in one of the tests it failed, but it makes sense because it's not quite as thick a reverse osmosis filter, so it doesn't have as much contact time. Um, but it did pretty good. Yeah.
But Grail came out on top. That is really interesting. Um, yeah, were there other brands that you tested?
Yeah, but
You don't really want to say.
I'm not, and I'm not the one who did all the tests. Our company,
Oh,
Chris, our founder, is the one who did all the testing. So I'd have to have him come and talk about the other ones he tested.
no, that's fine. It's good to know what the top one was that came out on, in case people do want like a more robust
Yeah,
filtering system in the backcountry, more reliable perhaps.
but it's a
Uh,
lot of pressure sometimes. So I, I would like I had my daughter try and do it, and she couldn't do it. So that there was a cost to that.
okay, that's good to know that maybe there's some accessibility issues. Not everyone, it won't work for everyone or everyone's needs. Adventuring plans on your calendar? Remember to grab your Lava Linens travel towel on your way out the door. Founded by a mother-daughter team, Lava Linens crafts durable, luxurious travel towels as a more sustainable and better performing alternative to microfiber and cotton towels. Powered by flax, hemp, and tencel, they're designed to be by your side for years to come. Use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 15% off your next order. Yeah, but if we're back to talking about just like standard drinking water and water quality in the areas that you live, I do know that pollution is a big problem. We've talked a lot about that, and climate change can also impact some of those things because of warming water temperatures, etc. And so In terms of the intersection of water quality and things like climate change and environmental justice, like how do those overlap? Or like where are the intersections in those areas?
Yeah, I tell you, it's interesting because you get you get climate change effects and you are like, okay, what is the actual cause of this? Can I identify the root cause is in fact climate change? You can't, right? You cannot say for sure. I will say though, I'm pretty darn sure it had an effect, at least in our area, with iron bacteria levels in wells. In 2020 to 2023, we had a pretty significant increase in the iron bacteria levels in our aquifer in the entire northwest part of Washington state. And the correlation to recent climate shifts in that same time period, at least according to the person I talked to about this, was pretty significant. I talked to Roy Collimore, who's an iron bacteria expert, and he tracks this stuff, and it's outside my realm of what I watch, but he tracks it, and he definitely saw a correlation between the climate and temperature in our area and the effects on the aquifer and the effect that would have on iron bacteria as just one example. Obviously, you get droughts, you get reduced water. Reduced water means less actual dilution of whatever the contaminant is. It then increases the contaminant relative to the water, and you're drinking more of whatever that contaminant is. Heavier rains means you have an increase in the water table, which means you have access to more nitrates, more bacteria, more sewage stuff that can then infiltrate into the water. So that can change everything. It can change whether or not the swimming water is safer to swim in, and it can change your drinking water too. So absolutely, the climate will affect every type of water.
And then how does environmental justice fit into all of that? And I'm sure it's heavily related to where you're located as well.
Very much, yeah. So obviously, lower income communities invariable have a chance of having and we're talking about first world now, of having exposure to higher levels of lead in their water because the infrastructure is not kept up and the older infrastructure is breaking down, leaching that into the water. They have a higher chance of having potentially having bacterial contamination if the upkeep on the system is not as high, or Legionnaires possibly. Legionnaires is a kind of a bacteria that can sit in, and this is less drinking water and more like in a hotter area where people are using air conditioning only in the summer, or less in the winter months and then in the summer, and then you have an air conditioner sitting for a long period of time and collecting just sitting bacteria that can actually collect Legionnaires, and Legionnaires can release into the air. It can be airborne. So, which is one of the big problems with Legionnaires. And so if you have that in your air conditioner, you have that in your hot water heater, and you don't have the money to check for that or keep up on it, all that can be of major concern. And then if we go to other countries, if you don't have access to well water, then you are traveling to get your water. And that is going to be, in almost every scenario, a woman or a child doing that, which means that they don't have a job and they're not getting educated, which forces them to be reliant on a man for money or survival. Access to clean water locally to you actually has been shown to dramatically affect gender equality in that area and allow for the discussion to even begin about gender equality. Because it's kind of a non-starter if in those communities, at least, if you have no way to survive without somebody supporting a man supporting you, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, I have heard that before. It is interesting to consider that because obviously they need water to
Yeah,
survive. But then if all of their time is spent then collecting water, like you said, they can't do anything else. That's just like they are there doing that. And I'm glad that you brought that up because it is important to recognize those I can't think of the right word. Those challenges, I guess,
yeah.
and what other communities may be facing in accessing those clean water systems. Okay, well, I feel like this was very educational. I hope is helpful to most people. And I think as kind of a basic recap, we can maybe close out by talking about what some of the most actionable and approachable steps would be for listeners that are concerned about their water quality and they want to make sure that it's healthy to consume and use in their daily life.
Absolutely. So I'm going to give you the steps, and I'm going to give you it for two different end users. If you're on a well, you need to do more testing than the minimum testing you did in your real estate transaction or the minimum testing that is required by the health department. So if you're on a private well or a small community well, larger community wells are a little bit different. If you're on either of those, find a way to do a full spectrum test. I'm not even going to give you a only if you want to. This is incredibly important for people on a well. Don't assume that well water is great because it's well water. Don't assume that your water is fantastic. 20% of well water has no requirement to do any treatment, which means 80% needs some sort of treatment. And that's because well water can literally be anything. We've found uranium at very high levels in well water. We've found pure cyanide springs from well water. It's kind of crazy what can be in well water. So get a full spectrum test done. They're not very expensive if you shop online for a source. Our website, purewaternorthwest.com, we have a way to do testing. You can also go to a website called TapScore. Either of those are ways that you can get full spectrum testing done. So that's if you're on a well. And then if you got that testing done, then talk to a water expert about what to do about it or how to interpret it or find a way to interpret whether it means anything, and then have a system customized for you. So that's well water. City water. City water, luckily, you have a lot of resources. And so the steps are go to the environmental working group, type in your tap water database, type in your zip code, get the results there. Don't freak out about what's shown there because again, it's a little exaggerated, but do get the data. So check there first. Then also go to your local municipality. You can usually type in the name of your municipality and then water report into Google, and you will find the water report for your municipality. If you can't find it, call them and ask them where to find it. Additionally, you can do the same type of full spectrum testing, and it's usually less. It's usually only a couple $100, and you can do it at your house. So as we mentioned earlier, what you have at your house versus what you will find in the city reports or at the environmental working group will be different. Luckily, with city water, you are very unlikely to have to worry about bacteria, which is the thing that's going to be the fastest effect on your health. But all the slow health effects are going to be found in the details. The arsenic in your water, the hexavalent chromium, and then a bunch of the chlorine byproducts, PFAS, pharmaceuticals, fluoride, which is still, again, a question mark. All of that is going to be found in the reports. So then deciding whether you're doing your own testing or whether you want to just throw in an under-counter RO, that's your choice. If you are having any skin issues at all with city water, do a full spectrum test to get an idea whether or not it's PFAS causing the skin issues, whether it's chlorine, whether it's chlorides or hardness. My daughter, for example, gets eczema for any amount of hardness at all in her shower. So after you've got that data, it is an easier step with municipal water to figure out what you need to do. Under-counter RO is very safe bet. If you want something for the whole house, it's a little more complex, and you're going to want to reach out to an expert like myself or someone local to you. Those would be the steps. I hope it wasn't too complex.
No, I'll be sure to include additional resources as well. And with that, what is the best way to contact Pure Water Northwest if you live in the Pacific Northwest region where you guys are covering, or other water quality experts in their area?
Yeah, so the Water Quality Association of America is actually a pretty good place to find people who are certified water specialists. If you want to just reach our company, or even if you're not in our area, if you have a quick question for me, you can go to purewaternorthwest.com and chat through there, or our phone number is on there. You can call us. And it's you might not reach me immediately, but you can ask for me and then I can call you back. And, but local water people in your area, you're going to want to look for people in your area who say that they are WQA certified, or are not just like plumbers that are also doing water treatment, but people who are focusing on water quality specifically and know how to interpret water quality results. So that would be the way to do that.
Perfect. I'll be sure to include all the resources that you've mentioned in the show notes so they're easy to access. But with that, Cydian, thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did too.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book, on YouTube, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. For even more updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.